Good evening and welcome to Face to Face. For the Newsfirst team, I'm Niresh Eliathambi. The month of April promises to be a very busy one indeed. We've got Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi visiting us on the 4th, which is this Friday, and then next week we have the debate in Parliament on the Batalanda Commission report, and that's on the 8th, and then we have the proceeds of crime bill, which is an important one indeed in anti-corruption activities, and that's coming up in Parliament. And on the 21st, or before the 21st, the President has promised revelations with regard to the Easter Sunday attacks, and all this in the backdrop of an election campaign which is going on, the local government elections, which are to be held on the 6th of May. To discuss all this, we have with us one of our regular guests, Dr. Paikiasothy Saravanamuttu, Executive Director of the Center for Policy Alternatives. Welcome back to the program, Dr. Sara.
Thank you.
Right. So things hopefully are picking up. It's been a bit of a slow start under this new government, understandable in many ways, and hopefully with April and further on, we'll see a lot more activity.
Well, yes, I suppose the sense of expectation since the two national elections continues. But I don't know, and certainly if you look at social media as well, that sense of expectation is decreasing and it is turning into sort of criticism and disappointment. You see, I think the big problem here is that the government, A, does not have a plan of action. It's been 6 months. We don't have any key pieces of legislation passed. We have the deals that have been signed with India and China, but nothing, as far as I know, has happened with regard to them. We have a serious outbreak of crime, and not much is happening with regard to that as such. And, the government tells us that they are working on these things and that, it's such a mess and they have to. But we don't have any sense of what they're doing. So on the key issue of transparency, we don't have very much to go on. And therefore, without transparency, there cannot be any kind of accountability. Effectively, the government is telling us, look, trust us. We're doing everything. Now, certainly with regard to anti-corruption and crime, there are certain things that have happened in the past where now people are being questioned. And indeed, the Batalanda report is also about that. But beyond that, we don't have much to keep us in that sense of sort of, and economically too, things haven't changed like that. As far as the ordinary person is concerned, yes, we can say that GDP is growing at such a rate, inflation has come down, and we can make various predictions based on those things. But for the average Sri Lankan, have things improved, or is it that they too are surviving on the assumption that this government is doing the right things? Certainly, waste and corruption have all of that has been cut down. And, that the Aragalaya brought this great impetus, this great, feeling that we have to have a change. And the JVP-NP government has tapped into that and, has tried to present a new political culture taking hold. But I think we have to go beyond that. It's 6 months, and we really need to be told what is happening. I think that's a key question.
So I think what you're getting at is we need a timeline.
We need to,
exactly. Perhaps for the rest of this year, what's going to happen?
What is the plan? Exactly.
Yes, just in the way that I opened the program today by giving some dates and saying these things are going to happen this month. But then beyond this month, beyond the local government election, what else will be happening?
No, exactly. We have to have a clear plan. You see, because the critics of the government have the fodder that, look, They are new, they are naive, they don't know what to do, they complain about a bureaucracy perhaps, and yet they don't have a plan to set that straight. So they really need to come out and show that they are very much in charge. Having said that, I think they will continue to be in charge, and maybe for some time, if the opposition doesn't get its act together.
Well, the opposition doesn't look like it's getting its act together, and that's a pity, because a democracy needs a strong opposition.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But we don't see that in this election campaign. There was some kind of cursory attempt by the SJB and the UNP, or parts of those parties, to come together, but no one really believed it would happen. Yes. Perhaps some people did, but it just didn't seem to be very serious.
And the longer it takes to happen, the less likely people are going to put their trust in it.
Exactly.
And, likewise with the government, they need to take the hard, tough decisions in that early period, which can be considered some kind of honeymoon period, because after that, they're going to then take on the responsibilities of incumbency.
Yes, but I think as long as the opposition is so weak and indecisive and divided, this may actually be giving the ruling party a sense of, well, nothing's going to happen to us, because who's going to do anything?
No, yes. I mean, I think the opposition too, at one level, apart from their attempts to get together, they have supported this government in the notion or the argument that it's a new government, they have to take time, all of that kind of thing, instead of getting on with their own task of defining themselves in terms of a proper alternative with plans, etc. And going out throughout the country, and the local government elections is a great opportunity to do that, to disseminate that plan.
Yes, and this local government election is highly likely to be the last election for another 4.5 years, unless the provincial council elections are held, but we haven't had those in many years, so we haven't had any promises from the NPP government.
Yes, I don't think the NPP is too concerned about the provincial council elections as such, yeah. They haven't really categorically said that they're going to have them.
So we have a situation where, with a weak opposition, this pattern of behavior on the part of the opposition and the ruling party might continue for some time.
Yes, and in that time, if the JVP-NPP government doesn't get its act together with coming out with new policies, implementing them, then we are going to just sort of float along a plateau, and then it will come to the point at which the current IMF deal expires, and then we might have to see whether we have to go for another one.
Well, I think when you talk to economists,
they all say we have to go for another one.
They say we have to go for another one.
Yes.
I haven't heard a single economist saying
who said otherwise.
That, well, no, everything's rosy. We'll be, we don't need the IMF again. It's sort of a fait accompli. It's going to happen. Now, let's look at some of the events which I alluded to. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, how do you see his visit? Which, of course, is the return visit. President AKD did go to India, which was a successful visit. And then, of course, Prime Minister Modi is...
So I think this is a kind of continuation of India's good neighbor policy. And I think on the part of the government, or part of both the governments, they want to dispel any mistrust that either side has had of each other. But what is going to be interesting, though, is the deals that they sign. Does that indicate that we are more and more becoming interdependent with India on the economic front? And if India is going to be the fastest growing economy into the future, I think, yes, we need that. But then there are arguments about economic sovereignty and all of that, which I think are not very convincing. But we are going to become tied more towards that economic sphere where India and the states of southern India are going to be the real dynamic leaders. Now, what's interesting in terms of the immediate question with regard to Prime Minister Modi's visit is, will there be any consequences for the Adani deal? And as far as we know, both sides are sticking to their guns that the prices that they have agreed on should stand. But of course, if we can reduce the price, leave aside the environmental questions which the courts have to decide on those questions, if we can reduce it, then we might be able to revive the whole deal and maybe have a deal as a consequence, because what is it? US $1 billion or whatever it is that it has been costed at, and we really can't afford to lose that kind of investment.
Well, yes, but at the same time, we need to get the best deal possible for the consumer in Sri Lanka.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we can't, we can't have a situation a couple of years down the road where the CEB tells us, well, we're buying power from the Adani plant for
8 cents a unit or whatever.
8 cents, whatever,
yeah.
and then the consumer has to pay higher prices because that has a direct impact on investment as well.
Yeah, the Adani argument, of course, is that in the long term it will be to our benefit as well. And that's the other point, you see. I mean, in terms of our negotiations with the Indians in particular, I've often heard this said that we need to enhance the caliber of those who are negotiating in terms of their technical ability to deal with the subject at hand, and that we shouldn't be sort of intimidated or bulldozed by the other side. So we have a lot of work to be done on that side as well, and that's perhaps why the government, although it's 1.4 million people in the public service, they're talking about taking 30,000 more in, who presumably are better skilled and equipped and have the capacity to deal with the challenges ahead.
Absolutely. Now let's get to another point that I spoke about, the Batalanda Commission report. Revelation after revelation coming out from the report. But you and I have seen this report a long time ago. The Commission report came out in 1998. Splendid job done by the commissioners, as always. I think it was Justice Jayavikrama of the Court of Appeal and High Court Judge Nihal Dissanayake, and they were assisted by a fine team of lawyers. But from 1998 up to 2025, nothing happened. No one tabled it in Parliament. The Attorney General didn't do anything, it just vanished. And we have had 7 governments since then, none of whom tabled it in Parliament. And then, of course, it's being tabled next week. It has been tabled, and the debate is next week. And that promises to be quite a fiery and entertaining debate, I'm sure. But this is not about entertainment.
No, exactly.
It's about justice, concrete steps being taken. What do you see happening out of, after the debate is over?
Well, I mean, it's been, 35 years or whatever it is. And just to play sort of devil's advocate, if you like, do we have enough evidence, and are there enough people who can give that evidence to actually convict any particular individual? Because I suppose the argument would be, look, you don't want a case to come to court and fall flat because there is insufficient evidence to come up with a conviction. Yeah? So that's one thing that has to be taken into account. The government can do an extrajudicial mechanism of some sort, but I think that too will, reek of a sort of witch hunt and make heroes out of, or martyrs and whatever, out of those who are indicted. So that is something that we have to watch out for, as to whether there is allegations will be made. People's minds will be made up as far as the general public is concerned that X and Y are guilty of some horrendous crime or torture or whatever it is. But we must have the hard and fast evidence to convict someone, and that might be an issue.
Yes, especially because the statute of limitations only allows charges of murder to be filed at this point. After 20 years. It's murder or treason, and those are the two crimes. And to get a conviction on murder is a very high bar of evidence indeed.
Well, I mean, if they can show that X or Y ordered someone to be tortured and killed, there is a chain of command. There are all of those things that can be brought to bear, I would assume.
Yes, but don't you think, apart from trying to get justice, which may quite well be very difficult, isn't this the time now for the nation to have a certain a reckoning of sorts? Because our history is very often just swept under the carpet, and you know, everything that happened in 88, 89, Batalanda and so many other torture camps, death camps, and so many culprits, so many crimes, and you know, we're talking 50,000, 60,000 people lost their lives. But Sri Lankans tried to forget it in many ways, to simply forget that era, and now we have been in a way forced to revisit this. Is this a good thing?
No, I mean, if one looks at our society today, we, after the Aragal era, we are led to believe that there are a lot of young people who are interested in politics, in governance, in system change and all of that. Now the issue, of course, is, do they know enough of our history?
Well, I would think not.
They certainly don't. They certainly don't, and they need to know where they're coming from before they decide on where they want to get to. And in that sense, bringing out of these reports is important because it's out there. Now, there is the whole question of just bringing them out is not enough. There has to be some action, and that's where the whole question of the judicial accountability and all of that comes into it. But I think the fact that they are being brought out and this information is going to be available is important. Yeah? But we mustn't get away with a culture whereby, you know, yes, accusations are made, allegations are made, there is no proper conviction, and that's it. Because we're dealing with individuals and human beings who should not be, you know, victimized in the way that they are supposed to have horrendously victimized other people. So, I mean, I think we need some sort of justice and accountability as well. But the fact that they have been uncovered and put out there in the public space is good, because the younger generation in particular needs to know about what happened. And we need to make sure that this doesn't happen again.
Absolutely, because you know, Sri Lankan history is a strange thing. It's not really taught. We teach our youngsters about King Vijaya and
I think the history books end with 1978, the last constitution.
Exactly. So we don't talk about our more recent history.
Absolutely.
And that's what we need to talk about, because there were so many.
So much has happened.
So much has happened. Yeah. So many mistakes made, and so many horrendous things happened, which is why Sri Lanka is where it is today. You know, we were once the most advanced country in Asia, and today where are we? But it's because of this history. So how do you teach this to these youngsters? It's not in the school history books.
So that's where the whole social media platforms are going to be important. But the thing with the social media platforms, of course, is that you can get anyone spinning it this way or that way. So one has to be careful in terms of which platforms one goes to, where you get official account and whether that official account is credible or not. But at least you will have it out there and that people may be able to debate and decide. Apart from that, of course, it's the whole question of how much of this is going to be read into our education system. And that's the long-term question.
Yes, and now you mentioned social media, but if you go to Google and type in Batalanda Commission report, there is no official site. You will find it in, this website, that website, people who have put these things up.
Yeah.
But there is no official government website which actually shows this. So shouldn't that kind of
no, yes. I mean, there should be a sort of department where the historic records of all of these things, the disappearances commissions, all of these commissions, the official reports should be there and available for the public to access. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's staggering the number of commissions, presidential commissions we've had.
Commissions, task forces, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, dozens and dozens, and the reports just get swept under the carpet, never see the light of day. And once in a way, you guys from CPA will ferret one out from some government department, or we in the media do that. But there's never been a transparent process, because it's always been, well, the president appoints a presidential commission, and the commissioners then present it to the president. So it's up to the president to release it or not.
Well, the hope is that this government may well have a somewhat different attitude. But at the same time, of course, there are going to be demands and arguments made that, look, if you have reports, commissions on what your political opponents did, then you have to look self-critically at yourself as well. You can't cherry pick which atrocities or alleged atrocities are going to be made public or officially confirmed. You too, quite simply, have blood on your hands.
Absolutely. So it has to be, I mean, you can't sort of confine this to Batalanda only. It has to, you have to look at the Matale, the death camp there, then Amelipitia, and then in the northeast you have so many cases. Yes. But then you need to put all this out there.
The only case I think that anything was done with the Krishanta Kumar Swami case.
Yes.
And there also I think the first accused was put in jail, but he escaped or whatever it is.
That particular case, I think 5 accused were convicted, and they were given the death penalty. So I don't know what happened to them.
Yeah.
Yes. But that was one case. And then, of course, the Amelipitia Central College case, I think 6 soldiers were convicted of lesser offences for kidnapping, but not for the murders. So they spent a few years in jail, 5 or 6 years, and they're out. So, so there's a lot of issues with the justice system right there. So we will get into this a little bit more because it's important that we learn from history. But right now we're going to take a short commercial break. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
ඔබේ ගමේ නගරේ දේශපාලනයේ හෙට දවස සතිය දිනවල සවස 6:30ට
ඔන්න මෙදා සැරෙත් අවුරුද්දට අපි එනවා
කන්තලේ මධ්‍ය මහාවිද්‍යාලීය ක්‍රීඩාංගණයට
අප්‍රේල් 19 දවස පුරා
අවුරුදු සිරියෙන් පුරවන්න ඔයාලත් එන්න.
අවුරුදු කුමරා කුමරිය බයිසිකල් ධාවන තරගය
උරුපැදීමේ තරගය සහ ජන ක්‍රීඩා රසක් සමග
කුරුණෑගල බැජී සංගීතයට ජනප්‍රිය ගායක ගායිකාවන් ගී ගයන
නැගෙන හිරට අවුරුදු
අප්‍රේල් 19 වනදා දවස පුරා
කන්තලේ මැදිවිදුහල ක්‍රීඩාංගණයේදී
මේ වෙලාවේ මේක කරන්න ඉන්නවා විතරයි උදයන්ග.
ඔව් බෙල්ල ගහලා යන වැඩ තියෙනවා නම් ඒව මට දෙනවා මාරු
මොකොත් නෑ කියලා කිව්වට ඔය අවුල් වෙන්නේ මොකද ඒක කියපු ගමන් ෆයර් උනේ.
මට මොන වුණත් මෙතු හොඳින් ඉන්න ඕනි චම්. ඔයා යව බලා ගන්නවානේ.
අද රාත්‍රී 9ට සිරස ටෙලිතිරයෙන් වසන්තයේ මහා මංගල්‍යය සිරස වසන්ත උදානය 2025
ශ්‍රී ලංකා මහවැලි අධිකාරිය හා එක්ව මෙවර ගල්නෑවට
පාපෙඩි තරග හා ගම හරහා දෙවීමේ තරග කාන්තා පිරිමි
කොට්ටපොර ගැසීම
කම්බෑදීම
දෑස් බැඳ මුට්ටිය බිඳීම
ලිස්සන ගහ නැගීම
ජනගායනා
සිරස වසන්ත කුමරිය තේරීම ඇතුළු තවත් ජන ක්‍රීඩා රැසක් සමගින්
අප්‍රේල් මස 6 වෙනිදා උදෑසන 7 සිට දවස පුරා ගල්නෑව මහවැලි ක්‍රීඩාංගණයේදී
තරග සඳහා ඔබේ අයදුම් පත්‍රය අදම බහර දෙන්න. ක්‍රීඩා නිලධාරී නේවාසික ව්‍යාපාර කළමනාකරණ කාර්යාලය ශ්‍රී ලංකා මහවැලි අධිකාරිය තමුත්තේගම.
විමසීම් 071 015 0430.
Welcome back to Face to Face. We are speaking with Dr. Paikiasothy Saravanamuttu, Executive Director of the Center for Policy Alternatives. Dr. Sara, so looking further down the road where all these commission reports are concerned, now you've read many of these reports, I've read many of these reports, but most Sri Lankans don't even know what it looks like. But they are extraordinarily detailed, aren't they? These commissioners, mostly, they've done a fabulous job. They've gone into so much detail.
Yes, there's a lot of detail.
Yes. But of course, it's a commission of inquiry and not one of prosecution. So
Just to go to the AG's department.
The AG's department, now that's an issue, isn't it?
No, I mean, I don't know why the government doesn't do anything about it. It has been on record saying that it will. I mean, very simply, as we've said so many times, the AG represents the government in court, and the AG provides advice to the government as well. But most importantly, the AG's department is in charge of prosecutions. So, given that most of the allegations are against people who are in government or who were in government, there's a direct conflict of interest there. Therefore, there is a commitment to restructure that office. Let the AG represent the government in courts as well as give it advice, but let there be a separate independent public prosecutor's office which can deal with all of this.
Absolutely, because as you said, the conflict of interest is glaring. It's quite ridiculous. I recall in the mid-90s, the Emily Pittier case, we in the media, and of course people like yourself, we had to really bring a lot of pressure to bear on the new government, which was President Chandrika's government, to actually go ahead with these prosecutions. And of course there were all kinds of obstacles which were placed in the way of actually prosecuting these people. Finally, they were arrested and prosecuted, but they were never charged with murder.
With the more serious offences.
They were charged with lesser offences, which, I mean, I suppose, from one point of view, it was a start, get something going, because no one had been prosecuted for anything. But then, on the other hand, with so many people having been tortured and murdered, these lesser offences of kidnapping,
No, yes,
it's
I mean,
not enough.
There is a sense of that is unsatisfactory, but as I said earlier, you need to have that hard evidence before you actually convict someone.
But right now, and actually at any point, nobody has actually tried to gather this evidence.
No, that's a fair point. Yeah, there must be people around who haven't yet come forward, who have valuable, important evidence, and we should be more proactive and committed to doing this rather than, produce reports or make them public when it is politically convenient or whatever.
Yes, I mean, if you take whether it's Batalanda or Emilipitiya, Surikanda, Matale, wherever, you're talking about thousands of witnesses. I mean, the people in the neighborhood of the Batalanda torture camp, this was not some small, shady little operation.
Yeah.
Everybody knew about it. The same goes with the Savannah army camp in Emilipitiya. This was where, suspects were taken and tortured. Everyone in the area knew about it. I mean, Emilipitiya is not some small village, it's a big town. So, in the same way, Matale, I mean, the Matale master grave.
So this is the point. I mean, people may not come forward for a whole variety of reasons, and I suspect that still fear is one of the principal reasons. But in order to get over that culture of impunity that has so far been practiced in this country, you have to have a government, you have to have a state that declares itself and demonstrates that it is going to get rid of that culture and go out and get this evidence. That's the point.
Absolutely, because right now, let's take Batalanda. We are relying on the commission report, and as fine a report and as detailed as it is, we're still not hearing from the thousands of people who knew about Batalanda and who would have information. There hasn't been a sort of a prosecutor's office set up to, okay, this unit is of the Aegis Department of whoever is going to deal with this. And I mean, we should be seeing calls, public advertisements saying anyone who has information, please come forward now. But we haven't seen any of this yet. So the actual gathering of evidence hasn't taken
place. Let's see what happens now when they produce the report in Parliament, and let's see what pressure we can all bring to bear on proceeding further.
Yes, because it's important, isn't it? I mean, of course, after doing all that, if there is insufficient evidence,
then of course the case must be closed.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think Batalanda is a starting point. But then you have so many other.
No, absolutely, absolutely.
I mean.
And as I said, I mean, there isn't any single political faction that doesn't have blood on its hands, as far as all of this is concerned.
Definitely. And then in the Northeast, you can't sort of cherry pick and say we are going to look at the issues which are in the rest of the country. You have to
deal with the issues there.
Deal with those issues. And there are contemporary issues, missing persons issues.
I mean, this government, for example, has used the Prevention of Terrorism Act about 5 times.
Yes. So. That's true. And that's another point we should look at, the PTA, which horrible piece of legislation from 1979, and it's still there. It was supposed to be temporary. And at the last election, every party came forward and said, we're going to abolish the PTA. And it hasn't happened.
Well, I mean, it hasn't happened. It's a disgrace that it hasn't happened, because they promise this. It can be done overnight. They can come up with new legislation. We made a promise at an international fora that we would repeal and replace it. But one question, why doesn't the media ask President Anurakumara Dissanayake why he hasn't done anything with regard to the PTA? Let's hear him on record saying why. I think there is a sort of I think people are still sort of into that sort of post-Aragaliya notion that yes, we now have a new political culture, we must give it time to take root, we must give this new government time to come up with its legislation and its new policies and all of that, which I think could be quite damaging because it's 6 months.
Absolutely.
And things happen a lot faster now than they did before. So I think, everyone needs to question rather than take this sort of manufactured consent that yes, this is a government that is heading in the right direction. They too have to be kept on its toes, and this is the whole point about an opposition. But in the absence or even in the presence of an opposition like that, we have to hold them to account.
Absolutely. Now, in your opinion, do we need the PTA at all? Do we need to replace it with anything, or do we have sufficient provisions in our other acts?
Personally, I feel that we have sufficient provisions in our other pieces of legislation. Likewise with the online security bill as well. They said it was to protect women and children, but there are only 2 clauses or whatever it is that deal with it. So, I mean, just passing new laws is not going to make a damn bit of difference, because if we implement the laws that we have without fear or favor, then we would have much more of a rule of law in this country than we've had to experience, certainly in the recent past, and even to a certain extent in the present.
Let's talk about the Easter Sunday attacks. Again, something which everyone remembers. It's not Batalanda, it's not, Suryakanda. It's
6 years ago or 5 years ago.
Yes, so very recent. We are still very traumatized by what happened because it hit us out of the blue. No one expected bombs going off. I remember when I got the first call that Easter Sunday saying there's bombs going off in churches, and I've covered so many conflicts, but my first reaction was, what? Who?
And why?
And why? Churches and hotels, who's doing this? That trauma is still there with our entire population. So we need to know why and who. And this is what the President has promised. He said by the 21st of April, he's going to come out with revelations on this. So we can finally have the whole story, hopefully. Because what we have got so far is bits and pieces, which we have put it together like a jigsaw puzzle, but there are still pieces missing.
And I suppose a reasonable amount of widespread public speculation and indeed belief that certain individuals were behind it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what we'd like to know is exactly who it was.
Yeah.
And not just who did it, but who enabled it, because there were so many warnings, and why did they enable it, and then who covered up afterwards.
And the other point, of course, is that if the President of this country is going to come out and tell us who was responsible for it, then the President presumably has evidence. And therefore there should be proper investigations, indictments and convictions.
Well, we're presuming that the President's information is from the investigations which
have hitherto happened.
And there have been many investigations by many agencies, so the evidence clearly is there, and hopefully enough to go ahead with further prosecutions.
Yeah, the President of the country can't come out and say X and Y are responsible without anything happening thereafter.
Absolutely. And of course, President AKD is a very seasoned politician. I'm sure he won't just come out with all kinds of allegations. He will have evidence on that. Right, so let's see what happens, but certainly a lot to look forward to in anticipation. And I haven't even touched on the New Year, which is happening in a few days' time. And so an exciting April indeed.
Yeah.
Right, so we have all that, and then finally let's talk about the local government polls. and we're finally going to have local government councils, authorities, which we can basically interact with as citizens. Because right now, who do you go to? Who do you go to when your garbage isn't collected, or when your street lights aren't working, or anything, water supply, so many things, mundane, day-to-day aspects of our lives, which we haven't had anyone to complain to or to get a solution. So this is going to happen now. What do you think about this as far as interactive democracy is concerned?
Well, I mean, local government is tremendously important. It's at the grassroots and all of that. But there are a couple of things. I mean, I think this election will be seen as being some sort of referendum of the first 6 months of the government. Yeah, although it is about a whole series of local contests. Yeah. Now, with regard to those local contests, it's difficult to say, but there might be certain areas in which the opposition may have good candidates or people who are well respected by the community, and they can do well. But overall, I think the lack of cohesiveness, the lack of unity and all of that on the part of the opposition is going to benefit the government. So I don't think the NPP-JVP government party is going to get as much a percentage of the vote as it did in the general election, but it still could well be the one that emerges overall as the winner of the election,
But Dr. Sara, now you and I both agree, and most people agree, that the opposition is really weak at this point.
Yeah.
So this isn't a very good barometer of the popularity of the ruling parties, because if you need to have two sides battling it out, and this is very one-sided right now.
Given that this is the state of politics in this country, it is nevertheless an accurate reflection, because if the opposition that we have is weak,
yes,
then the government of the day benefits from that. Yeah. But as I said, I mean, it's a series of local contests at one level, but at another level, it is also a question of whether people vote according to their notion of, is the government doing well or not, and is the opposition making sense to us?
Do you see a low voter turnout, or
that is a possibility.
That
is a possibility.
Is there voter fatigue over so many elections?
Well, there is the question of voter fatigue, and there is also the question of, look, I mean, yes, we just voted overwhelmingly for the NPP-JVP. They're going to win this election, so does it make a difference if we vote or not? But because it's local contests, I suppose there will still be a fair amount of enthusiasm.
Interesting indeed. And you're correct, because now it's your neighbor, your classmate, your relatives, who are running.
Yeah.
And you tend to know who all the candidates are. So so it's much more.
And
personal.
I think also, I mean, at one level, the government politicians might want to also turn it into a referendum on their 6 months in office, because they want to be able to show that people are still behind them.
Interesting. So we'll certainly be looking forward to that election and the results of it. And then, how do you see local development profiting by this, or going forward? Because right now, the councils are basically running themselves.
They've been run from the presidential secretary.
Exactly. So there's nothing much going on at the ground level apart from, the mundane.
No, this is the point. This is that you need to have a government at the center that is genuinely committed to this principle of subsidiarity. That is, you do at the local level all of the things that you can do. Those that you can't goes to a higher level of government. Now, the JVP-NPP's attitude towards devolution is at best ambivalent, because the provincial councils were able to engage in a certain amount of development activity of their own. Some did it fairly well, others did it fairly badly, in effect. But that is nevertheless a commitment to getting development going at the grassroots rather than everything being controlled from the center and directed from the center. And my reading of the JVP-NPP government is that they would rather control things from the center.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because to the person in a village or a town, he's not interested in what the local council does with the center. He wants things done by the local council for the community.
Yeah.
So do you see a clash here between the two principles?
There could well be. But I think for the moment, if there are no provincial council elections, it will be the center plus the local grassroots.
But Dr. Sara, now in the past, when a person in a neighborhood wanted to go and have a discussion, let's say with the chairman of the Pradesh Sabha, it was always very difficult, because you have to first talk to all these bodyguards and convince them that you deserve to actually talk to this important exalted individual who is the chairman. And of course there were always 4, 6, 10 bodyguards, whatever, and they weren't their PR was not very good, let me put it that way. So for the ordinary person it was very difficult to go and have a meeting, and a productive one, with these local politicians. However, with the NPP, we see that there are no coteries of bodyguards around. So do you think that, again, participatory democracy, will it be easier?
Well, I mean, the NPP-JVP government is committed to participatory democracy and all of that kind of thing. But, I've had so many people who've told me that they have great difficulty in getting to speak to the government. And that is that, some people say, yes, we knew the ministers when they were in opposition, etc. We might meet them at some function. And then they tell us, yes, we'll meet you. So phone up my private secretary or whoever. And then you phone up the private secretary, you don't get an answer. Or the private secretary says, yes, we'll get back to you, and they never get back to you. So there is that problem there as well. But hopefully, there will be enough, the extent to which there will be JVP, NPP people who are elected to local bodies and get control of local bodies, hopefully they will be able to pressure the national government to listen to them, and hopefully they will be open to their constituency. I think, the problem that I also detect with the JVP NPP government is how it is structured. The power structure is still with the party, and the party means Politburo and General Secretary. And that kind of top-down rather than bottom-up way of doing things is probably why we have a lack of transparency, why we don't have timelines, we don't have KPIs and all of those things to actually hold them to account. If they are really committed to accountability and transparency and all of that, we won't be all sort of going around sort of saying, yes, the government is doing things in the right direction. Oh, it's only 6 months. You have to give them time. This is the first time that they are in government. We won't have to be saying things like that. We would have something to ground our, observations upon, whether it be critical or whether it be commendatory,
Now, you spoke of this disconnect, that's the gap which has come about, or I don't think it's intentional, but it's more difficult to get to your member of parliament or minister because they are now much busier than when they were not in government. So let's give them that. But when it comes to, let's say, your Pradeshya Sabha, that's your neighbor. He can't get away from you. Well, you've got his phone number, you've got his mother's phone number, his wife's phone number. You were with him in school. You can just walk down the street and knock on his door. And now hopefully you won't find a bodyguard opening the door.
And also hopefully he won't sort of turn around and say, yes, I hear you, yeah, but I have to get instructions from wherever.
That would be a tragedy,
that
because
would be
local issues need to be resolved at the local level.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So as long as that does happen, well,
then it'll be much more democratic and much more participatory.
Well, let's hope for the best, but I do think that will happen, and if it doesn't happen, well, we will have a lot to say about it here on Face to Face. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for you this evening, and my thanks indeed to Dr. Paikiasothy Saravanamuttu, Executive Director of the Center for Policy Alternatives. Always a delight to have you, Dr. Sara.
Thank you.
And thank you to you at home for watching. Don't go away, because the news is coming up next. Have a great evening.